I want to thank everyone for coming tonight. My name is Raj Jayadev. I'm with a local community organization called Silicon Valley Debug and the Albert Kobrubius Justice Project. And you're at a discussion about just mercy, and by one of the country, if not the world's, sort of premier civil rights leader, Bryan Stevenson, a book that is now being read to really my great surprise by every freshman at San José State as sort of a volunteer basis by the university. And as a way to kind of bring the words of that book and the themes of that book to life, what we've done is the Record Clearance Project here in San Jose has actually formed this dialogue and this conversation. So we don't need to think about just mercy as something that exists in the South or exists in books or exists in a different time period, but exists here in San Jose today. Who here knows someone that has been to jail? I want you to keep your hands up. I want you to look around the room. And know that this is a growing fraternity, right? Over 2 million people in this country have been incarcerated, 1 out of 100 Americans. We're the largest jailer in the world. And what we have done and what tonight is about is not seeing ourselves as victims of that process, but the agents of change that could challenge the misery and destruction that mass incarceration has started. So what we're going to do tonight is we're going to hear some testimonies from people about how they've lived that path. We're going to hear from some experts that have looked at the issue of reentry and what are systemic issues that cause it and ways that we could actually transcend some of those challenges. And then we're going to invite you to have a conversation with us as well. So the first person you're going to be hearing from is my friend Larry Brundage. He's San Jose born and raised. Used to ride his skateboard over here by Roosevelt Park. And he's someone who is also a former RCP client. He's been a pastor in this community for 19 years and a community advocate. He's working with youth and families in underserved communities in San Jose, exactly where the criminal justice system has targeted people and extracted them from their homes and their communities. He's done gang prevention work, intervention work, and he teaches churches on how to invest in communities that desperately need some sort of glue and cohesion because of the fracturing that incarceration does.
So I'm just a regular guy. I grew up 11 blocks from here on South 22nd Street between San Antonio and San Fernando. And in fact, I lived on that block for 25 years. And growing up there, right around my teen years, I started to get kind of hemmed in with the things going on in the neighborhood. And I got caught up in some things that were going on that I probably shouldn't have been involved with. And I found myself somehow being not in a gang, but gang involved, having some issues with drugs and different things. And unfortunately, even as a young man, when I tried to walk away from those things, I found it very difficult. In fact, one day came around when I was separating myself from that scene, and I got attacked by a gang member. And I responded the wrong way. So I grabbed a crowbar, and I hit the guy. And in my community, for most people sitting here, you go, probably, like, wow, you went way over the top with that. Probably shouldn't have did it. No, I shouldn't have. I did the wrong thing. But where I come from, it felt like at that time that if I didn't put my foot down in that way, that those things were going to keep coming at me. And like I said, I did the wrong thing. I deserved to go to jail. I did go to jail. But it was in that process that God got a hold of me. And I began to change my life. It all started with a little old guy coming to my cell and giving me a Bible for the first time. So I had this little interaction with God in there. Just me, myself, God, Bible, no preaching, no none of that kind of stuff. And I began to want to put things in my life that would set a new direction and pace for me. Anyway, so I ended up getting sentenced to a year in jail. I was facing 3 to 5 years in jail for what I had done. But when I came out, and my life was very different. In jail, I got my GED. I completed a drug program. I was trying to do all the right stuff. And I thought, when I get out, I'm going to get a good job, and I'm going to start doing all the right stuff. But when I came out, what I realized, after taking 2 buses and a light rail to go to the mall and to go to all these places to fill out all these applications, not even exaggerating, I probably filled out 100+ applications, was honest with every single employer. And what I found was not a single place willing to give me a job that would help me at least sustain a decent level in life. And that's pretty unfortunate. I see a lot of that in pastoral work today with a lot of good people that want to get their lives together, but they need somebody to give them an opportunity. And I'm pretty hard on people. I'll look them straight in the eye, and if they're not willing to get their life together or they're just playing around, I don't spend a lot of time with them. But there are a lot of good people that really are wanting to make changes that need some help. I was fortunate enough to go back to an employer that I had worked with before I got incarcerated, and I left him because he called me something derogatory, because I used to dress just like everybody else in my neighborhood with baggy clothes, and I might have some red shoes on, or I was a spicy white kid, so I grew up kind of Chicano, and I'm fluent in Spanish. So what happened was I was working at this place, and one day the owner of the company called me homie. He's like, "What's up, homie? Go, do whatever." And I just got really angry, and I threw my stuff down, and I left on bad terms. But when I had my life change, I came out, I was very different. I had to humbly go back to that guy. And he said, "I'll give you a job, but you have to take the most menial jobs that we have to offer here." And he pretty much told me that you have to push, pull, kick, tug, or bite, or whatever it takes to get the job done with no complaining at all. I took it. That was the only option that I had. Eventually, I was attending a really good church, and they called me up, and they asked me if I would come on staff as a janitor. That was back in 1999. So I took that job, and eventually through that process, they were looking at how to reach into an underserved community here in San Jose. It's called the Hoffman-Villamonte neighborhood. And at that time, there was just a lot of drug dealing on the street corners, a lot of gang banging. There was some stabbings and some shootings happening there. So I began to pray about it. And I asked God to call my wife because I wasn't sure she wanted me to move back into a neighborhood like that and get back involved in that stuff. So ultimately, they asked me to start a few things to help out. So my wife and I upped our house, and we moved into that community for 8 years. And we started kids clubs, and we started ESL, and we started literacy programs and all that kind of stuff. So been serving in that, and then just a couple years ago, I met Peggy from Record Clearance Project. And I was fortunate enough to get a job, but many people didn't. Then she offered to bat for me in court, and I went to court, and they helped me actually clear my record and have my record expunged. One of my best friends is a police officer. I expected my wife to cry, but I called my buddy and told him what happened, and he actually started crying on the phone because he couldn't believe that these folks were kind enough to get alongside of me and go to court with me and say, hey, this guy is different. People can change, and people can make a difference. So that's my story. That's how I got involved in all of this. Yeah.
It's a remarkable testimony. You know, that term expungement is sort of a clinical legal term, right? It sort of doesn't feel the emotion that it must carry. What does it feel like when you finally had that day when you got your record expunged? What did that mean to you personally?
So mixed feelings. So it felt really good to have some people actually come alongside of me and believe in me. As I provided, character reference letters and all kinds of things. But when that judge, I remember standing in that courtroom, and it was a tiny Latina judge, but she had a lot of authority. You could feel like the eyes coming down from up there, right? But what I have to say is when she stood up and said, Mr. Brundage, I've read every single character reference letter. I've looked at what you've done in the community, and that's really evidence that people can change their lives, and you have done that. And people started clapping in the courtroom. For me, I don't get emotional easy. I'm a pretty cold guy, I guess. But, man, that was so affirming. That made me feel like I could come out of here and I can keep doing the work that I do. This means I can possibly get into schools without catching a lot of flack. on my record, which I still catch a lot, even though I want to get in the community. That's where we haven't fully arrived because, you know, even if you get your record expunged, there are some places where you have to still say, and it still hangs you up a little bit, but it gets me into more places than I could have gotten in prior to having my record cleared. So, yeah.
And Larry, you have a degree that you're working on that may be coming up fairly quickly. You want to?
I do, yeah. So, yeah, I'm 5 weeks away from finishing my degree at William Jessup University. I've been there for the last 4 years. I'm finishing up a degree in Christian leadership and business administration. So I'll be conferred in December. Yeah, I plan on going on getting my master's and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, first person in my family to graduate college too. Yeah,
that's beautiful, beautiful. You know, so the next person that actually we wanted to hear from is someone that also found personal strength to overcome the stigma and turn her life around and get past sort of the depiction of her by the system, so much so that she's actually going into jails and actually sharing her testimony to inspire others to do the same road. And that's Cheryl Lozano. You may have seen her on campus. She's a San José State student working on her bachelor's degree in sociology with a minor in accounting, so she's busy. But she's also a former client of the Record Clearance Project, and she works as a mentor for the project, helping incarcerated individuals move forward with their lives by passing on hope, faith, and possibilities for a new beginning.
Growing up here in San Jose, disadvantaged in a poor community, a single family home, you know, you know that your parent does the best that she can for you, but you're still like in a caste system. You're only limited to certain, I want to say you're limited to the environment as far as school activities. And when you find that you don't have the same kind of family that maybe your neighbor does or your peers do in school, you start to find other peers that fit your lifestyle. And that's exactly where I started. I started in junior high. I started smoking PCP at 12 years old. I was 7th grader. I got in gangs shortly after. And from there on, my life just took a spiral spin downwards. So much so that from that point on, you know, it was going in and out of jail and then finally going to prison and having my children taken from me a couple times. And as a mother, you really feel like, how low can you go when you don't take care of what God has given you? You have a child that you should be taking care of and loving that child, nurturing that child, but yet you weren't nurtured. So is that an excuse not to show your children that you love them and they mean the world to you? And there is a difference today, I know, nature versus nurture. And today that's what I have learned to do. At least tried really hard with my last 3 sons. I have 6 sons, married, now going on 34 years. And I'm just so grateful that God opened the doors for me to put my life back on track. So after being clean for 14 years, in 2006, I had a relapse. And sometimes when you don't finish those unresolved issues or the underlying issues, you find that those demons come right back to speak to you or for you to deal with them. And that's exactly what happened. I was on autopilot those 14 years when I took a crash that I will never forget. And it was at that time, I can honestly say, that I really felt like God was warning me. You know, I'll even share the scripture. So in Psalms 118:18, the Bible says that I have chastised you and severely, but I haven't handed you over to death. So for me, that was saying, you know what, Cheryl, here's 2 roads. You can go the right and straight and narrow, or you can go to the wide gate that leads only to a place of purgatory, hell. And that's what I felt God was telling me. And with that being said, I said, no, I don't want to go in that direction. And I began to pull my life together little by little, even though the odds were against me. even though I was trying to get back on my feet, get my children back, I would find that now I have to really face life head on, sober, and it wasn't easy. It was very difficult because at that time I already had my two second to the oldest children. They were 14 and 15, and they were really spiraling out of control themselves. And it was very difficult. Moving past all that, we finally got through a lot of unresolved issues, and I began to just do everything I could to get my life back together. Was it easy? No. But I found that I had to fight, and I had to fight. And with the strength of God, that's what I did. And God brought a lot of wonderful, beautiful people in my life to help me. So I no longer was in that sea floating alone. I had life jackets. I had those people to surround me and give me that strength. And it wouldn't be too much longer after that that a remarkable woman sitting here in the front, Margaret Stevenson, was able to give me a chance back into the community, into society, by helping me expunge my record. And that gave me so much more windows of opportunity to excel forward, to catapult forward, to really sincerely live my dreams. I've always wanted to do so many things in my life, but because, having, being an addict and crossing that road over to say this is enough, a lot of times, we get judged because, well, why can't you get it together? What's wrong with you? You should just flip off that switch and just, do it right. But sometimes in life, it doesn't work that way. As a person who hit many brick walls, I realized that it took those incidences to bring me where I'm at today. And I'm very grateful to say that, I worked hard for my AA degree at Evergreen, and I'm working hard for my bachelor's degree here on campus. This book resonates very much with me because of one of my sons who was wrongfully sentenced, and his YA turned it was supposed to be 16 months and turned into 6.5 years. And it just shows how broken our judicial system is and how we're in a caste system all in ourselves. And I just read Michelle Alexander's book on the new Jim Crow, and she speaks a lot about what's happening today, the mass incarceration. But again, I'm really grateful to be here sitting before you, very humble, and thanking you for hearing my story.
Thank you, Cheryl. Cheryl and I were talking, well, the group of us were talking before we came out, and we were talking about your son's situation. If you were going back in time and you're able to tell that judge and that prosecutor something that was deciding the fate of your son, what is it that you wish they knew?
I would have wanted them to know that my son deserved a chance to, I was trying to get my son into his lawyer was trying to get my son at the time into this school that was clear across country. I don't know exactly, or out of state, excuse me. But I would have really pleaded with that judge to give him that opportunity to really have a chance and an opportunity to deal with his underlying pain and issues, instead of locking him up in YA, where I really believe that the system knew that in Preston, that all he was sending my son or setting him up to do was get involved deeper with the violence there. But I guess if I had to say anything is to please give him a chance, because he deserved a chance. But I'm really lost for words on that.
Yeah, no, it shows how sort of sanitized the courts are. They're not seeing a young person that has a future and may have had hardships that caused a certain behavior. Every kid has behavior problems. Not every kid gets exposed to CYA in prison, right? There's racial differences in that. There's class differences in that. And not every judge is seeing a child as someone's son. And I think what some of the themes of Just Mercy was seeing if the court system could bring some sense of humanity to something that has been sort of an automated way of imprisoning people. But we want to applaud the mothers that are standing by their sons and will stand by their sons regardless of what a judge says. So if we could give Cheryl another round of applause. The next person that we want to bring up to the microphone is Jesus Ruelas, born and raised in San Jose, first-generation college student, attended De Anza College, received an AA in liberal arts with a social and behaviors emphasis, then transferred to UC Santa Cruz. Jesus graduated in 2015 with a BA in Sociology and Latin American and Latino Studies. He's currently employed, went back to helping other young people, employed at De Anza as an academic advisor for the Office of Outreach and Relations with schools, in particular working with students of color to make sure that they're provided opportunities, and actually went through the record clearance project himself. And I think it was last month, actually got his record expunged. So round of applause for that. And also another example of someone that not only moved forward for himself, but is actually lifting up the community in the process. So Jesus, if we could hear some words from you.
So just off the back, just to talk about what Bryan Stevenson, right, talks about in his book is, the overall injustice that people face in there, whether it be a lack of, representation or lack of resources, whether inside or outside. That those things were going on then, and they're going on right now as we speak. And when you talk about the youth, I was that youth. I got locked up when I was 12. First offense, juvenile hall. No chances, no house arrest, no nothing. I didn't, know no better. My public defender just said, take the deal. Why go to court? You would just get more time. So I took the deal. Ended up doing like 4 months at juvenile hall and then 4 months at the Boys Ranch out there in Morgan Hill off Cochran Road. And that kind of sparked my career, as being incarcerated, I was just a kid, 12 years old. You don't know much, but when you get in there, I know you guys hear our stories, but you guys don't really get it until you're actually in there, If you were trying to lock yourself in your bathroom, for maybe a couple hours, your bathroom is probably really nice, as opposed to, stainless steel toilet, stainless steel, bed and, brick walls and so forth, and a door with no handle, it gets real quick, and as a kid, it definitely, some people call it, traumatizes you or something. But for me, it sent me off a different direction that I didn't even know, I grew up San Jose, raised by a single mother, who worked 2 jobs, so I spent a lot of my time on the streets. Back in school, that was the time where, Spanish was not appropriate to speak in the classes, so I definitely, was not feeling school. School was not for me. My K through 12 experience was not, I didn't even go through much of 6th grade and up. I went to school in juvenile hall a lot most of the time. So I was in and out. I went to all the boys' ranches Santa Clara County has to offer. I went to juvenile hall. And that's how I kind of grew up. I grew up in that life, and not knowing any better. Again, I said it's a rigged system. Once you're in there, I was placed on probation. Depending on the clothing that you wear, anything that can violate you. So that's just kind of, it's an injustice because you did your crime or you broke your law and you do your time, but then it doesn't end there. That thing follows you and it haunts you day in, day out. And when you're coming back to the same thing, not much is going to change, right? I mean, you're going back to the same environment where you got pulled out of, right? Throwing back in there to the same place where you have no resources, nothing to get you out. So what are you gonna do best? I mean, in my neighborhood, it was people got locked up, and that's just how it was. You don't know any different, you know. When I was 17, I got arrested and I went to county jail. Being on juvenile probation, I had to be shackled up and transported from county to juvenile hall, because that's where my juvenile hall case was at. And, you know, that started off my county career, I guess you can say, in and out. Again, you know, it was just a system that continued to spiral, you know. And, you know, I went to prison. I went to Tracy. And that place was hard, you know. It was tough, and that's when I knew I hit rock bottom, you know. And again, the lack of resources, no mentors, no nothing, you know, no nothing. So I got out, you know. I couldn't get a job, like most of us mentioned already, right? I applied everywhere, you know, and I did a lot of odd jobs, construction, landscaping. My mother cleans houses for a living, and my dad, a little bit I knew of him, he does landscaping. So I did a lot of that growing up. But I mean, I can remember going to job, application. I would make it through the interviews, you know, I would. And then when they did, well, we're gonna do a background check, then that's where I would just not pass to the next round or whatever. So it was really hard, you know. I can remember McDonald's not even wanting to hire me. And then I was like, damn, man, I gotta do something different, you know. If McDonald's don't want me, then, you know. And my little sister just graduated high school, and she was on her way to orientation at De Anza College. I was 24 now, with 2 kids. And, you know, she told me, come with me, you know, and I was like, why not? Let me give it a shot, you know. I went out there. I had nothing to lose. I knew what life is about, you know. So when I went there, I got hooked up with the first-year experience program, which is kind of like a cohort to help students out. And that's all I needed this whole time since I was 12, was just a support, you know what I'm saying? And I got through the thing. I was there at De Anza for 3 years. I was a recipient of a prestige scholarship of $20,000 for UC Santa Cruz. I transferred out to UC Santa Cruz, did my thing there, graduated with sociology and Latin America Latino Studies, bachelor's of arts degree, you know, and came back, and now I'm working at De Anza College as an academic advisor there, and I work with a program that's called the Men of Color Community, which this program was initiated by, I guess you can say, the government or the federal government, to close the gap, because it's men of color, Chicano Latino students, African American students, Asian Pacific Islander students that are not graduating, that are not, you know, getting that higher education, right? You know, but it's the men, right? So men, you know, we don't like asking questions. We don't like asking for help, you know. So this program, I'm really proud to be a part of this program. And every young man I see on campus, I let him know that I'm there, and he can come talk to me. We can help choose classes. We can do orientation. We can do everything you need to do. I'll hook you up, man, you know, because that's what I needed when I was a youth. And I feel that it's our responsibility, you know. So you guys sitting here in college, don't keep it to yourself, man. When you get home to your neighborhood or to your cousins, you make sure that they know about the resources, right? EOP, whatever it may be, right? Transfer Community Center, anything like that, right? Because it is valuable. It may not be to you. Maybe for you it was easy, but for other people, it's not as easy, you know? Some people like myself had to go live a whole different life just to come back and go to high school, go to college with my little sister, you know, which was really embarrassing, by the way. But I was there and I made it out, you know? So definitely take it upon yourselves to be that mentor, you know? Let them know. A lot of people don't know about resources, you know? You got to go out and find them. Some of you guys as well, you're like, damn, I didn't know that resource was there, right? Financial aid, scholarships, right? So definitely, so that's my story, and thank you for being here. And the Record Clears Project, without them, man, I mean, you always have that thing hanging over your head, you know, like I always had to explain myself. I was honest as well in my applications, but I would say, like, you know, you cross off that bar, have you ever been convicted of a felony? I put yes, and if given a chance to explain myself, I would be more than gladly to go into all details, you know? And I was, you know, glad that I was able to get that job at De Anza Community College, and now I got my record expunged, which is even better. I can stop explaining myself now, right? Thank you.
one quick question. I mean, it's someone that is sort of guiding young men of color so they don't have to traverse a difficult path. Do the young men of color that you advise and mentor, do they relate to you in a different way because they know that you've walked a similar road that they've seen or maybe even experienced themselves?
Most definitely. The students I work with at De Anza College, and I go out to the high schools. I work with the seniors. I go to Eastside Unified District. I go to San Jose District. And definitely because it's somebody with their own skin color, you know, their reflection, letting them know, look, man, you can make it. You know, you don't have to identify with the streets and stay there, right? That's not your streets, man. You just live there. You can move, right? And like the gentleman was talking about. And so when they hear that from me and I let them know where I'm coming from, that I didn't read this in a book, I live this, you know, and they feel me, you know, and they're like, okay, well, show me what I can do. How can I register? How can I do my orientation, do my ed plan? What scholarships are available for me? And I put them all in front of them, and they're like, okay, you were for real, you know? So again, I encourage all you guys to share your resources, man. Don't be greedy. Keep them, you know, don't keep them to yourself. You know, there's students out there, you know, families struggling. We have a food pantry. I'm promoting that. Oh, did you eat yet? Come by the food pantry, man. You know, we got snacks, we got granola bars, we got top ramen, all that good stuff, right? Hey, you know, students got to eat, right? So always promote your resources, you know, definitely, yeah.
The next person that we want to bring up, I'm actually going to bring up, and that's Eric Espinoza, also from San Jose, graduated from Pioneer High School. He was a star athlete, played multiple sports, attended San Diego State, majored in business management. He moved back to San Jose to start a family and got involved in a lifestyle that led to addiction and ultimately incarceration. But he has learned to overcome adversity through perseverance, patience, spirituality, and applying something he calls the art of self-mastery. And he's now living a much healthier life. And when we're talking backstage, today is actually a day of celebration. He is 10 months sober today, exactly. And these are the kind of spiritual victories, testimonies that need to be honored and publicly acknowledged. And we're really honored to have him here.
First and foremost, I just want to thank the Record Clearance Project for making a difference in my life. You know, this last time I was incarcerated, I was remanded in court on 12/6 of last year, and I was actually in a lockdown dorm. M8B, and these lovely ladies came in and they did their presentation, and they gave me a whole new look on life. And you know, they got done with their presentation and they handed out these surveys to let them know how they did. And I looked at the survey and I said, thinking to myself, there's not enough room on the survey for me to tell them how thankful I am for what I can do for my life now, for what they can do for us and what they can do for me. It's kind of nice how everyone's been sharing, because it's kind of like just goes. There's a higher power working tonight, because everything's just kind of just flowing, because there's actually a part of the book I'd like to just share real quick, and then I'll go ahead and get into my share on overcoming adversity and self-mastery. And it's in the introduction. I know the introduction, you know, did I even read the whole book? Yes, I read it. But but this is what stood out for me, and it says, each of us is more than the worst thing we've ever done. Each of us is more than the worst thing we've ever done, you know. And it also goes on to say the closer we get to mass incarceration and extreme levels of punishment, the more I believe it's necessary to recognize that we all need mercy. We all need justice, and perhaps we all need some measure of unmerited grace. What is mercy? Mercy is compassion shown to an offender, also imprisonment rather than death for first-degree murder. A blessing resulting from divine favor or compassion, also a fortunate circumstance. Compassion shown to victims of misfortune. The clarity of life is like looking through a two-way mirror, meaning just how transparent can we be? Or should I say, how much do we let society see of us in order to be beneficial. To me, we need to be more than just that. I sincerely believe that by outlasting and breaking through the adversities of life, a higher power gives me the tolerance towards those whose thoughts and ways in and out of the program in life that conflict with mine. For though I need to remember for the fact that I cannot always know what constitutes absolute truth. I need to remember that through adversity, I may find out that the person, place, thing in front of me may be right, while I very well could be all the way wrong, yet naive, yet unaware. Knowing to myself that my decisions will be the only things to make my own motives right. For only this can ease my conscience when I sometimes get irritated to the brink of not being able to tolerate the walls I've built around myself. Our true home of self-mastery. This means living in the present, no anxiety, no then, and no after. Just now, the present. To live in the present is a miracle. But when life becomes unmanageable, when it becomes disorganized, when I lose a sense of self, life becomes stagnant like stale water. The inner peace is our true home. Once we learn to touch this peace, our lives can be transformed. To conclude, all goals apart from the means are therefore an illusion, and becoming is a denial of being. It is by human error that is reported throughout the ages, truth becoming a law of a faith, places obstacles in the way of knowledge, which is in its very substance ignorance, encloses truth within a vicious cycle. We should break such circles not by seeking knowledge, but by discovering the cause of ignorance. I say this because I believe that our system is so uneducated as to the people that they don't see as who we can be. You know, I'm just happy that I've been plucked out of my addiction, and I've been taken out of the eye of the hurricane, and I've been placed on the calm of the ocean seashore. And you know, it's kind of like this is practice, practice, practice. And there's kind of an analogy that I use sometimes. You know, there's a recipe to this thing. It's kind of like baking a cake. There's ingredients, there's a recipe, there's directions to baking a cake. If you take the oil out of the cake, you can't get the cake to rise at the end. If you take the eggs out of the cake, you can't get the cake.
We should send his writing to Bryan. Serious. Like, I mean, he really did write the epilogue of this book. I think we should send it. So thank you so much, Eric. I wanted to bring up a professor here who you may have taken a class with, Alessandro De Giorgi. He's an associate professor in the Department of Justice Studies at San José State, received his PhD in criminology from Keele University in the UK. He's been a research fellow in criminology at the University of Bologna, Italy, and is a visiting scholar at the Center for the Study of Law and Society in the University of California, Berkeley. But he's been doing remarkable work by looking at a particular community of Oakland. And when you think of these large systemic whirlpools that are swirling around, what happens when they touch down on one community? And I think his findings are remarkable. Quite frankly, I haven't read anything like that. And we've been reading a lot about incarceration. So I'd like you to give a round of applause for Alessandro and welcome up to the stage.
I'm going to talk for a few minutes about the research that I've been conducting in Oakland with formerly incarcerated people over 3.5 years. I still keep contact with them, but not as much as I used to. So an average of 1,700 prisoners are released every day from prisons in the United States. masses of mostly African American and Latino men and women are dumped on a daily basis into segregated neighborhoods of urban poverty from which they were forcefully taken years before. As a consequence of their criminal records, returning prisoners will be even less employable than they were before entering prisons. Most of them will be channeled towards the minimum wage and insecure workplaces where they will fill the ranks of the working poor. Not surprisingly, the cycle of incarceration and reentry has become one of the most powerful engines of social inequality in the US. The specific area of my fieldwork features some of the highest rates of crime, incarceration, and prisoner reentry in the city of Oakland. In the census tract that I was covering with my fieldwork, 48% of residents are unemployed. The median income is 1/3 of the average of the city of Oakland. 45% of families live below the poverty line, and 50% of the population is African American, 21% is Latinos. My initial goal was to study prisoner reentry as a growing branch of the American penal carceral state. But I ended up studying and learning more about poverty and urban survival than about the expansion of the carceral state. I didn't find so much people on the run from cops, probation officers, parole officers, but rather people struggling to disentangle themselves from extreme poverty, homelessness, untreated physical and mental ailments, public neglect, and institutional abandonment. So reentry is considered successful by official standards, at least as far as I was able to document in Alameda County, as long as the released person does not commit any serious crimes. Recidivism suppression prevails over any effort to improve former prisoners' well-being, physical and mental health, civic integration, housing, living conditions, and so on. At any turn in their trajectory through the carceral state, from arrest to reentry, criminalized people are told that success or failure is entirely dependent on their own efforts. The dominant ideology of personal responsibility, market competition, and self-help pervades every aspect of the reentry process. Former prisoners receive plenty of resume preparation sessions, job interview coaching workshops, anger management classes, NA or AA meetings, 12 steps, but much less affordable housing, free healthcare, or accessible education, not to mention a basic income, which is what people need. The vast majority of the people I studied literally struggle to survive. Their basic needs, housing, food, medical care, medications, often go unmet. They face homelessness, malnutrition, physical ailments, and chronic mental suffering. Most of the people I followed were unable to receive any public assistance. Food stamps in California were unavailable to drug felons until a few months ago. Subsidized housing is still largely inaccessible to people with criminal records. The people I followed in my research seem to have fully internalized the ideology of personal responsibility, which is constantly reinforced in prisons, rehabilitation centers, and reentry programs. They blame themselves for their past and present conditions, which they attribute to their own free choices and not to the class and racial oppression that limited their life opportunities since they were children. Many of them experienced their own disenfranchisement as the right, obvious consequence of their wrong choices. That way, the emergence of any oppositional political consciousness is effectively prevented through the behaviorist ideology that is inculcated among people at every turn of their journey through the criminal justice system. You have only yourself to blame. A large population of marginalized, disenfranchised, virtually unemployable men and women are dumped on a daily basis into segregated urban neighborhoods where they scramble to survive under the gaze of this low-cost, largely privatized network of post-prison social control agencies, halfway houses, drug rehabilitation programs, workfare agencies, NGOs, and so on, and of course, a large army of low-wage employers eager to employ vulnerable workers. Piecemeal penal reforms inspired by budget concerns will not address the structural crisis that we're facing. So in the end, I think that only a large movement against social inequality and racial discrimination in welfare, housing, education, healthcare, policing, and so on, a movement inspired and led by them, by those who have been the targets of the carceral state, will begin to dismantle the deadly machinery not only of the prison, but also of its aftermath. All right, thank you.
Thank you, Alessandro. I have to say, I really think it's an insight to deconstruct some of these more what you call piecemeal reforms as being temporary. And maybe what Bryan Stevenson is talking about, maybe what our speakers have talked about, is something deeper and more significant than just dollars and cents. Our final speaker, who I think is also going to give us some navigation on how to build that movement, and the reason why I know it is because I didn't meet Edith in the classroom. I met her out in the streets when she was fighting for justice for people here in San Jose. But she's also an accomplished academic, so she walks both worlds. Edith Kinney is an assistant professor in the Department of Justice Studies and a coordinator of SJSU's Legal Studies minor. She received her JD from Berkeley and her PhD in jurisprudence and social policy from UC Berkeley. She's trained as a lawyer and a scholar, and her academic and applied work explores the gap between law on the books and law in action. Edith's research interests focus on the roles of community activists, human rights advocates, and social movements play in criminal justice and policy reform efforts around prison and jail conditions, human trafficking, sex offending, and problem-solving courts. And she's a movement maker here in San Jose. So round of applause for Edith.
A few of the things I wanted to talk about really highlight, I think, some of the lessons that we've learned here, that this idea of perseverance is really important, but we need to take a closer look at why we are getting so many people caught in a justice system that doesn't serve victims, doesn't serve their families, doesn't serve our communities, and certainly doesn't serve the people that are caught, as Alessandro says, in the machinery of the prison and its aftermath. And to kind of bring that home, I was really excited that we have the Just Mercy as our reading for the campus reading program this year. I think that the idea here of Just Mercy is that we need to both understand how experiences of violence and experiences of oppression, experiences of harm, and the violence that we do to others, but that's a shared experience as well. And I really like the comments about the system doesn't treat us like the people that we could become, right? And I find that those are some of the more inspiring, transformative, and indeed radical approaches to justice today. So I want to call attention to the fact that although folks do not have access to education, certainly anywhere near what they should, we have a new program of in-justice education where folks are getting not just their GED, but also a college equivalent credit coming forward, right? So we've got that going for us. We also have active community members who are monitoring conditions in our jails, who are monitoring what our organizations of policing and prosecution, what they're doing. Groups like Silicon Valley Debug, I think, are doing a fantastic job, and I know my public defender friends in other parts of the country have been learning about how better to help folks, both at the sentencing phase, where we need to make people more human and understand that they have connections and they have family members too. But we also need to look at the other end. How about we affect things in the pretrial stage? We actually provide quality and pay for quality public defenders and pretrial defense services. How about we help inform our community members of what their rights are in the first place? Right? So I really think that we have a lot of opportunities here. And without looking for how we might be able to help others avoid criminal justice system entanglements. So how do we disrupt these issues? I think that we're seeing some encouraging reforms, whether or not they're driven by compassion and shared humanity, or just folks getting tired of getting taxed or paying for large settlements, I'm not sure, but I'm gonna take some of these gains and I'm hoping we can run with them. But we need to make sure that our goal here is not just to kind of clean up the system, right? One of the concerning issues now is that after President Obama had ordered the DOJ to close private prisons, those companies are investing in reentry and probationary supervision, right? So this is a very slippery sort of institutional kind of problem that we need to address, not only helping people to reenter our community and to join our community and to contribute their stories and their lessons learned. But I think we also need to look at why we criminalize so many people in the first place. Why are we criminalizing a status? Why are we criminalizing certain behaviors that may or not have this social harm that necessitates a long sentence. There's many, many, many ways that you can contribute to efforts to address racial injustice, to address the injustice of incarceration, and to address the needs of both offenders who may need help. But I also want to note that we're responsible as citizens and as voters. And if we fail to recognize the shared humanity that we have with folks of all races and folks of all economic statuses and citizenship statuses, I think that we're really missing out on the ways in which we can kind of be honest with ourselves and to work for just mercy in our lives, in our communities every day. So thank you.
Thank you. That was a tremendous call to action. Are there questions that people have? We have a couple microphones or comments you want to make about sort of the vibrancy of the moment or what you heard from the testimonies?
So the question's for Cheryl. What are you doing now to ensure that your son has the resources that he needs once he finishes serving his time?
Well, the particular son that I'm talking about, actually Raj, my son gets sentenced again because he had went back. But we're going to talk after, and he's going to see what he can do for my son come December when he gets sentenced. So for me, that's a blessing, and I'm praying that I'll be able to, well, as it is, I'm being a role model for him right now, and I always tell him, education changes you, because it does. It changes who you are as a person, how you think, because you no longer think like an addict. You no longer think like you're disadvantaged. Not that you forget where you come from. It's because it's like you're growing into the person that you should have always been. So he has a lot of support when he's willing to take it, and he's ready to make that transition and changing. And but he has a lot of resources. I have a lot of friends, and I just met another one today. So Debug is. I've heard the name, but I've not heard what they do. And tonight I was introduced to what Debug could do for my family. And thank you, Raj, for letting me know that I have an open invitation that you would help my son. Thank you.
So my comment is for Jesus. I think what you said about when you told someone you didn't just read it in a book, I think that's huge. And that's something that I struggle with, and I think about on a daily. The struggle between being an academic and also being, real life, understanding real life, communicating with real life people who have went through this. And your comment just inspired me because, I think that for people who are in this field, we can't just read about it in books, we have to put it to use, but we can't go out there just pretending we know it all as well. I think it's really important that there be a relationship between academia and, our communities. And I think it's important that we know our communities. And I guess my question for you is, what do you suggest for someone like me? I don't want to ever appear false. And I don't want to ever talk to you because I work with youth and I mentor youth. And I just want to be, real with these kids, but I don't ever want them to feel like I don't understand them either. So any suggestions you have or comments or anything, I would really appreciate.
I appreciate that. Thank you. And I think you've kind of answered your own question. It's just kind of you got to keep it real. I mean, they can tell. They know what's up. But regardless, it's just you. Perhaps even just being there for the student doesn't mean you have to, relate to them or understand them, because they might not even be your color skin, right? So that right there is already kind of drawing a line from, you might have certain privileges that the students you work with don't have. So just keeping it real, letting them know, yeah, I don't know about you. I don't know where you come from, right? But I'm here, right? And this is what I can do for you, right? And these are the resources available. And like that, I think they will respect you for keeping it real with them, Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Do you believe that the whole premise of emotion is what prevents us as a society from accepting that rehabilitation is the way to go and not punishment?
The role emotion plays, of course, it's a huge swayer in the whole conversation. Because if something happens to your child, your mother, your brother, you know, that you're going to be emotional. You're going to want to protect. You're going to want to defend, and maybe even have some vengeance. But I think the key here is, and in this book, have you grabbed this book yet? Grab it. I read this book in the last 2 days just to sit up here and talk about it. And I have to tell you, I'm a pretty vengeful guy. I don't like seeing kids get hurt or taken advantage of, and I like to, you know, put it down on people who do that kind of stuff. And I have to tell you, the way that Bryan Stevenson lays things out in this book and how he humanizes folks who have been wrongly convicted, who are sitting on death row for crimes that justice systems know that that person didn't commit, but they just used them as a fall guy. To know that there's even one person on death row like that, that puts the brakes on sending anybody there. How do you know anybody else on there should be there, even going in that track? Not that anybody should, but I'm just saying I think it's a matter of, instead of being afraid and emotionally withdrawing, have more courage and step closer and look folks in the eye and find out how you get immersed in communities where all this stuff is happening, and allow yourself to feel what's really going on. You know, what did happen to that child that made them get to the place where they've done these horrific things? So you just can't help what you're born into. You just can't, and it affects you. So I would say that. I would say be brave, 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 just as you talked about earlier today. So, yeah.
Being the niece of a Pelican Bay inmate for the past 13 years, 7 of those years being in solitary confinement, it does put a burden on the family. And his parole is coming up very soon. And the thought of him reentering society after being there for 13 years is a very scary thought for us. And I guess the question just for anybody is, what is the foundation our system needs to establish to make reentry successful? And what is successful reentry really? The definition, what is it considered, and what's the foundation that has to be laid not only for the inmates but for families and society as far as reentry?
What I would say is, for somebody coming out of a system like that to get plugged into a community that loves them and will rally around them, when you get incarcerated, it's a whole different economy, especially if you've been there for a long time. If you can survive in that economy, you develop a community in there. And you can develop a lot of accolades, a lot of acceptance. You can get people around you, and it can give you this false sense of family and community. So when folks get out, they need to find a better community out here. They need to find people that are not afraid, that step up to the plate, and that can look them in the eye and really genuinely love them. And, you know, one of the guys I work with did 25 years in Pelican Bay. He's been out for 11 years now, and he's doing good. He's a completely different guy than he was when I first saw him come out a few days after he was released. He was a pretty tough guy, pretty intimidating. He was big. He was probably bench pressing 400 pounds and was not afraid to walk on a yard with a bunch of tough people. But we stuck it out, and he's a really loving guy. He loves God. He loves people. He's out there, and he's doing his best. So I'd be willing to give you my cell phone number to give to your uncle as soon as he steps out. Call me. Let me figure out. I don't have all the answers, but what I will say is I'm not afraid to look him in the eye and tell him that he's worth something. And if we can all do that and walk together, we get it done. We can make it happen. Yep.
And before we give a round of applause to our panelists that are really our pioneers in this movement, I wanted to ask everyone that was involved in the record clearance project to please stand up so that we can acknowledge you and also give you a round of applause. And some of you in the back, too. So, Jose, we see you. You got to get up, man. These are the folks that Bryan Stevenson was talking about, and don't necessarily have a book written about them, but he was writing about them whether he knew it or not. So I want to thank you for the work that you continue to do.